I remember my first game in the big leagues was at Wrigley Field, and dream come true. Everything about it was awesome. But I also remember going to my hotel room that night, sitting at the end of my bed and saying to myself, is this it? Like, whoa, a 26-year-old kid asking that question. I thought it was going to give me everything I needed and wanted, because that's how much I idolized baseball. That's how much effort I put into it. I was expecting the return on investment to be everything I ever dreamed of. And I'm not saying don't pursue your goal of baseball, because baseball gives so much. And I'm so grateful for everything that it taught me and everything it brought me. But I will say that when you make baseball everything, you are going to probably struggle more mentally.
Welcome back to Unleashing the Baseball Mindset, where we discuss mental performance strategies for athletes at every level, from youth baseball all the way to the professional game. Today, we've got a great guest joining us. We have Rocky Cherry. Rocky is a former professional pitcher who spent time in the Cubs, Orioles, and the New York Mets after playing at the University of Oklahoma. Since his playing days, he's transitioned into the business world, but what makes this conversation so valuable is how he's carried that competitive team first mindset from the field into everything that he does today. So, Rocky, we really appreciate you being here. And anything you'd like to add to that intro?
Well, if you guys are going to follow anything, I'm much better at business than I am at baseball, but hopefully I have some good advice on the baseball front, because I had a lot of failure. But thank you guys so much for having me on here, and looking forward to it.
Yeah,
That's awesome. And so let's start like at the beginning. So whenever you think back to growing up, and what got you into baseball, and how did that become a part of your identity?
When I first started playing baseball, my mom signed me up, and she would take me to the games, and I was good. And a coach one time told my dad, hey, you might want to look, because Rockies just seems to have something. My success in baseball brought my dad kind of into my life. My dad was a great father, but my success in baseball got him motivated, where all of a sudden he was the one taking me to the games, and then eventually coaching me throughout my career growing up. And so I think that my relationship with my dad grew because my success in baseball and my ability, I should say. And so I think that's what kind of started the journey of like really appreciating baseball.
Yeah. About what age was that? And especially whenever like the coach started to think or notice that there was something different.
Honestly, I remember it was around 7 or 8 years old, because I was in Little League, and Jack Akins was my coach, and he was a exterminator. And I made the All-Star game, All-Star team. And he was just like, I never even picked up a baseball before or knew really anything about it. And it was just kind of like, I'm sorry, I did play in T-ball, but my mom said I'd sit in the outfield and just play with flowers and, you know what I mean? Just pick at ants and not pay attention. And so all of a sudden, I don't know, I just enjoyed it and
Yeah.
started clicking.
So was it the reason I'm asking this is Dylan and I talked a little bit about this last night, but was it something in your physical performance, or do you think there was something in the mental side where you just appeared to be a little bit different?
I really think it was physical. And the reason why I say that is that I was a big kid always. I always threw hard. I always kicked the ball hard. I just physically was pretty gifted, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one thing I can immediately go to, is that sometimes I think the mental side of the game inhibits us as young athletes, because we start thinking too much. And what we have to do is really enjoy the game. If you think about the people you've been around that have had success, it's kind of like they're not thinking about anything. They're just enjoying playing.
Yeah. And that shows up a lot. That comes up a lot on the show too. I absolutely agree. The game's different today because kids feel much more pressure, and the pressure is from, they feel the financial pressure because their parents are investing so much more than like whenever we just played rec ball as a kid. So I think there's a lot of things that happen, especially today, where it kind of pushes kids to get a little bit more into the mindset, and not necessarily in a good way. They feel pressure to perform, and it removes that fun aspect that you're talking about. And yeah, one of the things that we've had a lot of guests bring up is, especially for younger kids, it has to be fun first. And if it's not, they're not going to stick with it long enough to ever start to see those physical abilities really start to show up.
For sure. It makes me think about expectations. You said expectations are extremely high because of the amount of money and time your parents are investing, and kids feel that. And I think
Yeah.
that I see that transpire in so many times that when you have high expectations, you're almost anticipating what's the result is before it's actually happening.
Yeah.
So, for example, the other day I was playing tennis, and I know it's not baseball, but it's a physical activity, and it was for like a pressure point for like the match. And my first thought that went into my head was, man, I better not double fault because it's my second serve. And the reason why I was even thinking of that is because I put expectations on myself of like, what are people going to say? Like choked, I could have served it well. I'm already thinking about the byproduct of what happens if it doesn't go right. And I
Mhm.
think that's what hinders people so much, is that there's that weight on you.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking like, man, if I don't perform, I'm not going to get the scholarship. You start going down this rabbit hole of like, dude,
Yeah.
you're 15. Don't worry about a scholarship right now. Just worry about
Yeah.
having fun, hitting the ball. Like
Yeah.
this is an investment in your life more than an investment of like what ROI you're going to give your parents.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly, you're right on. I mean, the parents have this return on investment mindset, and unfortunately, we get into the kids feeling that so much that, like what you said earlier, they are overthinking it, and that's where me and Kyle have come in to try to change that thought process that these kids have. But it's tough because you're fighting an uphill battle a lot, because even at the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year old is when that club baseball is so heavy. It's that return on investment is always in the parent's head. So then at home, it's always in the kid's head because of the parents. And so it's just this constant battle, not to mention all the other distractions that the kids have with the phones and all that kind of stuff. So it's just this constant cluster in their heads, and where we're trying to get them to think properly and to quit thinking so much, like you said, but to think properly, positive thoughts, positive affirmations, visualization, all those sorts of things.
This is why I'm on this, is because the few episodes that I've listened to is because it's not really called ROI, return on investment. It's called return on impact. And that's what parents have to start thinking about, is how am I going to get the best investment on my child for them to impact their lives? Because at the end of the day, if I asked every parent, would you write $1 million check if your kid came out of school and had a good head on his shoulder, was morally correct, had a faith in Jesus, ran after him hard, was in the word of God? Anybody would write that, right? But a lot of times parents think of it as a transaction of like, oh, I'm spending this money. I might get a scholarship. He might
Yeah.
be famous. He might be this. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, you guys are spending this money so he can learn lessons in life that are going to help him be the person that he needs to be the best producing in society individual, and that's sharing the gospel, and that is doing the things that they really care about. And that's what the mindset, they got to change their mindset to
Yeah.
help the kids' mindset.
Yeah. Right on. Dead on. Dead on.
I don't think parents invest the money thinking they need to get paid back. So it's not that type of an ROI. They want the best for their kids. We truly believe that. Sometimes, though, to your point, what they think is the best for their kids isn't necessarily it. They want them to get the best hitting coach. They want them to win games. They want them to do that. And that's not it. It's exactly what you're talking about there.
I'd say 80% of the time, the parents are looking for the outcome of baseball.
Well, we do, and I don't want to dwell on this too much, because I think I got to give parents credit too, right? They're putting a lot of time and effort into this and shaping their children. But to your guys' point, if your kid doesn't perform, I have had so many talks when I go home, drive home, and my dad's like, "Hey, why'd you look at that strike three? Why didn't you throw a strike? Why'd you walk that person?" And so even if their heart is right, they're not communicating with their words
Yep.
what kind of return they want. They're saying, hey, if you don't perform, I'm disappointed in you. I'm spending this money on you. If you don't get a scholarship. And so those are those expectations, going back to where we started on this, that start weighing on you. It's like that guy signs a brand new $100 million contract and he starts failing. It's because that expectations are on him, that all of a sudden he's the same guy, same player, same talent, same 5-star tool player, but now he can't perform because the expectations he's put on himself and from others.
Let's jump forward a little bit in your career, and tell us about how your mental performance progressed, whether you saw it being a problem or maybe beneficial whenever you were in high school and moving into college.
When I experienced failure, I typically turned to harder work. And so, okay, things aren't going good. Okay, I'm going to go get in the gym. I'm going to throw more. I'm going to work on my mechanics. Like, what am I going to do to get out of this? And the good thing is, I had a lot of grit and perseverance. So I would kind of grind through the mental depression of like, gosh, this isn't going well, because I put so much emphasis on like being successful in baseball that it became almost like my idol. And then so when things didn't go well, I felt like I was not performing well. So as I got older and I saw that no matter how hard I worked, the mind was preventing me, no matter how physically gifted I was, physically hard I was working, it wasn't solving the problem. So I was like, okay, if that's not solving the problem, where is the problem and how do I solve that? And so that took me through a journey of exploring the mind. And I remember coming to Baltimore and we had a mental coach. And I remember sitting down and they were talking about just basic mental stuff like breathing, visualizations, and all that. And I'm like, man, I've read that stuff. I've done that stuff. But it did open up my mind of like, is there something here that I need to explore more? And so that took me to a whole nother realm where I decided to hire a mental coach because I felt like there was some opportunity for me to grow mentally. And so that's what I did. I came across a person named Steven Yellen, and he partnered up with a guy named Buddy Biancalana. And maybe you guys have heard of Buddy Biancalana because he was a shortstop, and I think it was his rookie year. He played in the World Series, and he had like an amazing series. Like he maybe won the MVP there, but he was one of the shining stars. And they thought, man, this guy's the future of Royals baseball. But he never, like he was out of the league after a few years, if not one, because he couldn't get back to that performance. And so he was searching like, how could I perform at this high level? And then now I can't. And that's probably every kid out there, whether you're a professional or a youth baseball person, you've had those at bats where you're like, you've had those games where you're like, wow, that was amazing, but you struggle repeating it. And so that was Buddy's journey, was how can I repeat it? And so he came across Steven Yellen. Steven Yellen was working with like Roger Federer, the tennis player. He was really in the more of golf and tennis type stuff. And he ended up writing a couple books called The Fluid Motion Factor and The 7 Secrets of World-Class Athletes. Buddy came along him and kind of said, hey, baseball players need this, because a lot of times, you know, tennis players, my niece plays tennis and she's constantly, she has a mental coach. She's 15 years old. It's because you're a one-on-one, you know what I mean? It's such a mental game for them. And so Buddy said, hey, let's do this mental side for baseball. So the basis premise of it is that the mind controls the body. So a lot of times when I was talking about my physical aspect of when I struggled, I was trying to control my body through mechanics, through strength, and I was trying to figure it out. But what happens is that's almost me making it happen. And when you make it happen, that results in like guiding the ball, you know, you're pressing a little bit, you're forcing it. You know, we've all been to that where it just feels uncomfortable, right? And then when you let it happen, it's more of a trusting, reacting, letting things flow. It feels like you have a rhythm. And so the best example I can give you is what they explained to me is that if you're in the ocean and you're at the surface level, so like you're underwater, but you're at the surface level, you can hear people playing, splashing, talking, waves crashing, birds chirping. There's a lot of noise going on, right? And the deeper you go in the ocean and you go to the very depths of the ocean where there's complete silence. And they say that when you're in the zone, your mind is in the depth of the ocean where it's not thinking. I mean, if you guys think about when you're at the top of your game, what happens? You're not thinking. You literally react. You have a game plan, you execute on it. If you get punched in the face, you literally just change direction. It's like nothing happens.
Yep.
But yet, when you get punched in the face and you're at the surface and you're just all in your head, things go bad. You start pressing, you start forcing, right? You start muscling up because you're like trying to control it, like what's going on. And so what we called it is like, you can't be in the zone all the time. Even Michael Jordan wasn't in the zone all the time. And it feels good to be in the zone all the time. I mean, it feels good to be in the zone, but you can't be there. So what we called that was the gap between the surface level of like lots of thoughts, and then the bottom of the ocean is where the zone is, where it's silence of the mind. And the reason why that was so important was that if you look at every time you're in the zone, you're not thinking about it. You're just letting things happen. So how can we get further or deeper down in that ocean every time? Like, how do we create that mentally? And so I used to I wrote that on my glove. So I had it stitched on my glove as the gap. And the reason is that was a reminder of like, I remember when I was in Boston and I was with the Orioles at the time, and it was my second time to maybe pitch in Fenway. And I'm literally sitting up there and my legs were shaking so bad. I'm sure no one else could see it. In fact, I think I went and looked at the video to, replay it, and my legs weren't shaking. But in my mind and on my, like what I felt was the whole stadium was watching me shake, and I was about to literally buckle. And I remember I was so nervous that I just like turned over and threw to first because I was about to buckle. And I was like, the mental side of that was so drastic that there was so much noise. I remember I could hear the guy over in the stands yelling like, "Rocky, you suck." And I'm like, I was literally like talking to him like, I know. Throw over to first, And I'm like, this is ridiculous. And so that's where the gap was. The gap would be like, okay, hey, you got to calm your mind. You're at the surface level of the ocean. Let's get down, let's relax. And so then there was what they call drills. And these drills just kind of helped you get in the right mindset to let things flow down. So for example, what they said is the prefrontal cortex, where kind of like all your thoughts go through. When you are in the zone, basically it has a thought like, hey, fastball outside, or you're a hitter and you see it, you react, right? And so when you're doing that, there's really that thought just going through, it's firing to your muscles and everything's just working smoothly and seamlessly. But when you start thinking about it, like fastball outside, man, I just don't feel right. I'm not getting my fastball outside. I'm not feeling that. So what happens is you start overthinking, right? And so that thought no longer reacts and goes to it, but you start gathering all this extra noise that causes you to use your big muscles. And so you start doing things, trying to control it yourself, right? And so basically these drills is what I'll call it, basically helped you try to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. The things you're trying to accomplish was letting your body react. It knows how. I've thrown an outside fastball a million times, let it happen. But a lot of times, like mentally, let's just say I can't hit the outside corner a couple of times, and mentally I start going, oh my gosh, can I not throw the outside corner? I start thinking, is it my mechanics? Am I pulling out? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And then all of a sudden you just start becoming blocky and the rhythm's not there and you're overthinking. And so what they want to do is eliminate that noise, get down in the gap where your body knows how to do it, but clear your mind to let that happen.
So going back a little bit, I don't know if you know that we have, I've written these course manuals called Competing with Confidence, and that's what we implement with Dylan's team. And in there, I list the 4 realities of human performance, and one of them is the mind-body connection. And it is just trying to get people to understand that relationship between the brain and the rest of the body, and which one controls which. I think an example that I use in the book that I find to be impactful, if you think of like butterflies. Well, like, why do you get butterflies in your stomach? There's more than 100 million connections between the brain and the stomach. So, of course, whenever you start going through these scenarios in your brain and expecting a not so great outcome, your stomach is the first place to feel it. And I find that, especially for young athletes, just getting them to understand, okay, that's just what happens. I can't control it. So stop trying to control it. And I'm starting to understand too that, well, whenever my heart rate speeds up, that's my body preparing for action. And my pupils dilate so I can take in more information. And it's really just trying to paint this picture that our bodies are performance machines, to your point, if you let it be. And then I wonder about some of the drills you had mentioned. And one of the things that comes up a lot whenever we talk to athletes, whenever I listen to interviews with athletes, even in our book, the breathing. So, what type of breathing drills did you use? And did you ever find that breathing alone helped you get into the zone?
Yes, breathing was routine and was probably one of the most important, most consistent things that I did. But I'm gonna go back and talk about a drill first before because we're gonna touch on both of those. A drill that everybody can try, and whether you're out playing a golf, making a putt, it really works really well. There is focus on counting, focus on the number itself, the space in between each number, and try to be as consistent as possible with it. And so what it looks like is you count 1 to 10, it's like 1, 2, 3. And while I'm doing that, I'm really focusing on the number and I'm focusing, making sure that am I hitting that perfect space? Like if I'm waiting 1.25 seconds between each one, am I doing that exactly? And you can also do that backwards, 10, 9. And what happens is that when you're doing that and concentrating so much on those numbers and the space in between, I guarantee you will have a good motion. I'm not going to say you're going to make the putt. I'm not going to say you're going to throw a strike, but I guarantee you're going to be like, that felt good. The problem is that after you do that so many times, subconsciously you're like, oh, I've done this counting drill before. And so like your conscious mind starts distracting yourself and thinking those same thoughts, even though subconsciously you're counting and you're trying to remember, but it's like, oh, I've done this before. I know the exact spacing, all that stuff. The point is that these drills actually work, but the problem is that your body is smart, your mind is smart, and it gets used to them. And what the ultimate outcome is to utilize these drills to get you to a point of you understanding how just letting your mind like free itself, clear the mind, and letting, clear the mechanism. I forgot what movie that was. You'd say clear the mechanism, you just
Rookie.
right. Yeah, whatever that movie was with Kevin Costner, I remember that. But I'll tell you another drill, Kyle. You were asking about the breathing. Okay, so let's just say I'm throwing, not doing well, or maybe I'm 0-2 on my count, so I'm like, oh, I tense up potentially a little bit, like whatever. He would tell us to on the back of the mound to, visualize yourself right there in your living room or the most comfortable spot you've been. Because for me, I felt like when I was in my living room watching a movie, my mind wasn't thinking about baseball. It wasn't thinking about anything except for the movie itself. And so like find that, happy zone, like Happy Gilmore, right? And literally during that time, you're breathing in like that relaxation, that feeling, feel what it's like. You are physically sitting there. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. And then when you come out of that, I'm telling you, you're going to be in a relaxed state. And then when you get on the mound, you toe the rubber, and right before you're, like let's say you're in the stretch, you're about to go, I always like to kind of let out a deep breath right before I start, relaxing the shoulders, kind of mimicking some of those other things. But that was like what we called another drill to kind of clear your mind, because a lot of times there's a lot of noise going on.
I love the counting, and that's something that we've talked about on this show I can't remember if I put that in the book or not, but an example that again has come up a lot in a lot of the research, a lot of the literature I read, is you get these ultra marathoners that count their steps. And then you think, well, that's crazy. Like, what good is that going to do? But to your point, if you're genuinely invested in keeping track of the number of steps, you can't be in your conscious mind thinking about how much everything sucks whenever you're running 100 miles. And you mentioned when those thoughts pop in, well, that's the essence of mindfulness. It is recognizing, hey, here's this thought. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person because I can't stay focused, but let's refocus. Let's recenter on the counting and get back into it. And the process of that just really strengthens the whole mechanism up here to be able to stay engaged in the counting, find that zone a little bit better. And I really liked too, on the breathing, maybe you're going to get to this, but so far, I've not heard you say counting like for a 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. I've not heard you doing things where you're focused so much on the breathing. I'm a firm believer, like if you focus on your breathing as much as you focus on the counting, well, then you kind of get lost in the breathing, and that's a good thing. However, you start to teach that to a younger athlete, what do you think happens? They get out of breath, they hyperventilate, they forget to breathe. They're so focused on their numbers. But the way you positioned it, like, hey, put yourself in your happy place and just be there and relax, it seems like that might automatically regulate breathing without being hyper focused on counting inhales and exhales and all of that stuff.
It's funny. I was
Yeah.
thinking the same thing along the terms of kids, right? Because when we go through our clinic and we focus on the breathing, and that's exactly what Kyle was saying, is we see so much of the, they can't breathe right because they're trying to count their breath, the seconds in, seconds out, pause, all that. And that may be a better situation for, young athletes, just to focus on where they are. And then that, like you said, that may actually control the breathing and bring the heart rate down.
So agree with you guys. Breathing exercises to me, or where I had success, was doing them outside of the actual sport. When I say that, like on my off time before I'm even hitting between the white lines, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm in the bullpen, maybe I'm in the locker room, maybe at night, doing those types of breaths, I think are very important. In fact, I still do them to this day, even sometimes before I go to sleep. My thing is that when I tried to count and breathe when I was in the midst of action, is that my mind would go back and forth between the count and like what I'm trying to accomplish, and is my mechanics off? And so I was like, and what happened is it almost created a rush for me where I was kind of speeding up a little bit. And that's the one thing that if I could tell kids anything is you've got to slow it down. And if you look at it, most of the time, even on a putt, because I was talking about the counting, is we're looking up, and we talked about this earlier too, we're like looking up at, is it going to go in the hole before we even hit the ball? Or if we're pitching, we are literally looking at the catcher's mitt of like anticipating where the ball is supposed to go before we've even let go of it. And that's like, we're speeding up time. And so that's the one thing that it didn't do well for me, was sometimes when I do the breathing and the counting, like you talked about, Kyle, was that kids can like almost hyperventilate. It's because their time is speeding up. The best example I think about is like watching football. You can see a young quarterback, especially in the NFL, sometimes in college, but especially in the NFL. It's like, man, they're not seeing the reads. Like everything is happening too fast for them. They need to slow the game down. And within a year or 2 years after that experience, what happens? Everything slows down, and then they're able to make more calculated and better decisions. And so that's the biggest thing I could say is whatever it takes, whether it's breathing, counting and breathing, relaxing, doing drills, finding your happy place, whatever it is, like you've got to slow down time and be present, because when you're in the zone, you're not anticipating the putt going in. You know it's going to go in, but you're really there feeling that stroke. You can feel your fingertips, right? Like you can feel the ball in your hand. You can feel the bat in your hand. It just feels like it's like part of you. And then all of a sudden you see the ball and you react and you hit it, and it's so pure and perfect. And we've all felt that feeling. And the way to get that is When you feel that, it's because you're so present in where you are right there. You're not speeding up. You're not anticipating the ball, and then you're lunging for a breaking ball, at this plate.
And you see pitchers all the time, especially as in teenage years, as soon as something goes wrong, they get back on the mound, they try to rush it and try to go straight back into it because they think, I'm just going to go and I'm going to get this next one instead of slowing it all down. And I think you made a valid point with making sure you're working on these things outside of the lines, is making sure that you know how to get into that space outside the lines before you get on the mound or at the plate.
Hey, man. Well, I'm going to tell you guys one more drill because I think this is one of it's my favorite one, I think. And so what this was as a pitcher was focusing on my arm being as like whippy as possible. So basically, my whole focus was, okay, you got your pitch. I am going to try to whip it through the zone as fast as I can. And for like a hitter, it would be like, my only goal is to whip that bat through the zone as fast as possible. The reason why that works is because instead of me thinking about like, oh, I need to be on my balance point, I need to drive, I need to get my arm up, I need to keep my front side closed, I need to follow through. It's like, hey, I know all that stuff. That's the foundation of what I built my career on. All I need to focus on is just letting that arm do what it's designed to do, which is like whip it, letting it flow where it literally feels like a noodle. And if you do that, for me, it really helped me because it was simplifying the motion of like, hey, I know where I need to be. It's just a matter of reacting and doing it. And as a hitter, the same thing. So that was also a good one for me.
So we try to teach our athletes we call it a mission. And I got that word mission from the sports psychologist Ken Ravizza, who wrote Heads Up Baseball 2.0. A mission, sometimes like a goal, but we try to boil it down to maybe 3 keywords. And it's different for every person. But one of them might be something like breathe and be whippy. So I'm wondering, would it be something like that for you where you're thinking just, I don't know if that question makes sense.
Right? Yeah, no, you are 100% correct. I actually think that part of my routine was breathe, relax the shoulders, and like bit. You know what I mean? It literally was like a routine involved with it. And so now I bet a lot of the people are asking, so you got all these tricks, like why weren't you successful? That is a great question because these things actually do work. And what you'll see is that if you do some of these drills at a period of time, you're going to feel like, wow, I feel good. I had a lot of expectations on myself. I was harder on myself than probably anybody else. And so I'm already looking at the headlines of the outcome of worst case scenario if I'm not performing. And so no matter how good my mental game was, whatever drill I was doing, it was still the overall expectations of myself or from others was greater than where I was. And so I want people to understand that at the end of the day, like, relax. Do you think it matters if I played baseball or didn't play baseball? To be honest, when you guys asked me to talk about this, I was like, dang, it's been 15 years. I don't even remember what I did in baseball. Like, it's going to pass. Every record you have is going to be broken. And so like, start looking at a bigger picture. And something that really helped me too was my faith. Like when I was struggling, I would turn to God because God, I need you. I'm trapped. I'm depressed, whatever. And then all of a sudden, when I started getting back in control and I felt good, I'd be like, all right, God, you can go to the back seat now. I'm driving. I got this. And it was just this cycle. I'd use God when I needed him.
Yes.
And if I knew what I did today, there's a couple things that would have really helped me. First off, I remember my first game in the big leagues at Wrigley Field, and dream come true. Everything about it was awesome. But I also remember going to my hotel room that night, sitting at the end of my bed and saying to myself, is this it? Like, whoa, a 26-year-old kid asking that question? I thought it was going to give me everything I needed and wanted because that's how much I idolized baseball. That's how much effort I put into it. I was expecting the return on investment to be everything I ever dreamed of. And I'm not saying don't pursue your goal of baseball, because baseball gives so much. And I'm so grateful for everything that it taught me and everything it brought me. But I will say that when you make baseball everything, you are going to probably struggle more mentally. I feel like the people that you're around that play well sometimes have this loosey goosey feel about them. It feels like things roll off their shoulders. They're kind of just ho hum about it, but yet they go up and just rake or throw 100 miles an hour. It's just like, gosh, I wish I could have that. So those are, I don't even know if I got to my 2 points, but the first point was that putting baseball as everything is, I think, a hindrance in your mental health of enjoying baseball, which allows you, when you enjoy baseball, you actually perform better.
Well, God doesn't let us down. So you were successful. The whole point of your journey might have been just to share that story, and to let people know that the 26-year-old kid that had it all based on what he thought it was going to be, asking that question of, is this it? the and just that idea of faith too, and being something that enhances mental performance, not that we're focusing just on the benefits of God, but if you go into a situation and your mindset is the battle's already been won, like, it doesn't matter what happens here. If I lose, that was intentional by the Lord, because it gives me an opportunity to express my faith. If I win, then it gives me the opportunity to give glory to God. So if that is always your mindset, then really, like, what? Yeah, you're going to get nervous. You're going to be anxious. These things are going to happen. But if you can approach it of the let thy will be done, because that's what's going to happen anyway, then it just relieves so much pressure. And we've heard that from athletes too.
Yeah.
Dylan,
Well,
you want to
that
add?
was actually my second point. So thank you for saying it. Well done.
Well, Terrio made that point, remember? And he was, I remember it so vividly. I think about it all the time when he said, "Newsflash, the game forgets you." And if you don't have that faith in the Lord, and you don't have, if you don't know that, that God is with you and driving the car, or however he put it, then you're going to be lost. Like, because he talks to, a lot of the guys that come out of the game and they have PTSD almost, like they don't know what to do with their lives. And that's when he approaches the faith concept, and like, what do you believe in? Like, what do you think this is all about? And I think a lot of times, when we play baseball, when I played too, is my prayers were always transactional. It was always about the game. And you can definitely lose yourself in that, and not understanding what success really is with the Lord, you know. And the success with the Lord is why we're here today, right? Why we're doing what we're doing, why we're, what are we doing now, And I think that's one of the hardest things to teach these kids, is that baseball is not the most important thing in the world. You shouldn't be idolizing baseball. The fact is what you're learning is baseball is what God's giving you to learn. And if you make it, great. If you don't, you still got something to lean on, and you still have somebody in your corner fighting for you always, And that's kind of how I see it now. Obviously, I made the same mistakes. I didn't get to pro ball, but I played in college, and I threw it away because of that same. I mean, we hear that story so much of, these transactional prayers, or, idolizing the game and not understanding what it's really all about.
We had Dalton Beck on, who won a national championship with LSU. And I think he put it so beautifully as well. Whenever he really dove into the Bible and started learning more about Jesus, and he realized that there was somebody always there looking over him, he said it just relieved so much pressure from the game. And I really, like, a follow-up question I have for him: why did he not pursue it beyond LSU? And I kind of wonder if maybe in that moment he realized baseball's not the big picture for him. And so he's now working with kids, and he's probably having a bigger impact on what he's doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I've learned, is my journey of my faith has become stronger, because I was transactional, like you were talking about, Dylan. I used God when I needed him. And then all of a sudden, as I really understood Jesus's sacrifice, and this is Holy Week. And so, I think about him coming in on Palm Sunday and they're waving their branches and saying Hosanna, which means save us. And they thought he was going to come in on a war horse. He was going to be a savior for them in the sense of like taking over Rome, giving them freedom. But instead, he rode in on a donkey, knowing that he was going to sacrifice himself for something greater than they could have expected. And so on Sunday, they celebrated him. And on Friday, they said, crucify him. And the amazing thing is that just thinking about that sacrifice that he made, that they didn't even know how good that bloodshed was going to be, and that resurrection that he had was going to solidify the blood covenant, because he said, when you break this bread, think of my body. And when you take this wine, this is the blood that I will shed in the new covenant that we have with you. And that new covenant was shed on the cross, but then that doesn't matter unless he resurrects from the dead. And he did that. And when people really understand God's sacrifice and how much Jesus, means to us and the purpose, it does simplify life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have problems, right? I think it's Matthew 11:28-30. Do not come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So basically, come to me, all who are weary and burdened. But basically what he's saying is that, hey, you're going to go through life and it's going to be hard, but if you take my yoke, it's going to be easier, because you're going to be walking with me through that. And it's the same thing that happens in baseball, is that we put so much pressure on ourselves and it feels like the weight of the world is on top of us. But if we can like share that burden with Christ and truly put him first, then that helps us out.
I think too often think of the journey of Jesus and relating it to our lives, and we'll never go through the pain that he had to go through. But if you think about it, he lived a perfect life, right? He did everything right. He was graceful, right? He never harmed anybody. And then, he had to bear his burden, right? Had to carry his cross up the hill. And then a lot of times we think, well, if we do the right things and we put in the work, right? So if we struggle, if we go up the hill, if we bear our burden, we get to the top of the hill, and then finally we've won, right? And it'll all be great. But no, in Jesus, the most pain imaginable was at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the other side of that to where we find glory. And I think if we frame that in our own lives of like, well, life's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Once you make it to the top, that doesn't make it easy. It's actually harder up there. It's whenever we're on the other side of all of that, whatever that means to anybody, like that's really where the glory is. And it's just a mindset of like, the Lord put us here to work. That's what we're supposed to do, is you're here to work. And that's our job. It's going to be hard. You'll have some good experiences, some bad experiences, but it's supposed to be hard. That's the point. And you just keep working. You just keep going through it. Whether it's baseball, it's business, it's school, whatever the case is, it's supposed to be hard, and just embrace it. So the big question that comes up, how do we get kids to understand that? We understand kids, we're talking about the prefrontal cortex, that's not fully developed. That's why kids do weird things. That's why our dreams are so weird too. So we understand that they can't always logically connect the dots. But what do you see as a way to start planting that seed early on in youth athletes? So then maybe by the time they get to high school or college, they can then connect the dots and understand that there's a bigger thing going on here.
I think it starts at a higher level or a bigger picture, right? Is that as kids, there's a fine balance between the people that have high expectations for themselves, that are gritty, perseverant. Those people tend to be pretty successful in baseball, and especially if you marry that up with talent. The thing is that you want them to have grit in that expectation. You want them to, have that desire to get up there, but you also got to balance that a little bit with making it fun, seeing the bigger picture. And so it's kind of like this seesaw where you've got to like make sure you're staying engaged enough and like making it important, but then also having a reality check that like baseball, it's not your everything, right? There's more to life to it. And if you can kind of find that happy median, I think that the bigger picture kind of can help you dial in a more specific game plan because I think each person's mind's a little different.
Yeah, that's for sure.
One of the things I see in baseball, and I think this might rub a lot of people the wrong way, but again, maybe that's the point. If we, as parents, if we're going to put Jesus first, then we should put Jesus first. And what that means to me, what my family and I do, we make very few compromises that cause us to miss church. So we're going to go to church. My wife and I both serve, and my son runs around like he owns the place. And it makes my heart so happy that he feels that comfortable at church. But then once they start getting older and you start to get to select ball, where they're playing baseball on Sundays. And my mindset right now is my son Caden, he's not going to do that. Like there will be some times where maybe we're going to miss church, but most of the time we're going to church because that's important to us. So it seems like, and I know parents can do things to reinforce it, but it kind of seems like, well, we're putting baseball first. So then that kind of messes it up in the kids' minds. But what do you think about that, or how do you feel about that?
That is something that we dealt with when we were a kid. Like, I remember we'd leave church early to go play baseball. And so it created baseball as something that was probably considered more important at some times, right? Because we were talking baseball every day, practicing baseball every day. We were going to church on Sunday. And then we would leave church early on Sunday. So I think that getting into the word daily is probably the most consistent praying, without ceasing, whether that's morning, evening, lunch, just with the kids at bed, all that stuff, like just making it a priority in your life, right? Because people follow examples, not just words. And so I think that, yes, Sunday is important in that we should honor that time. But also, if we really looked at the Sabbath, if I recall, I think Sabbath is actually a Saturday according to biblical time. So, like, are we all missing it? But the point is that I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer on missing church, not missing church. But I will say that if you're having church every day in your house and you're making it a priority and you're in the Word, you're making your kids in the Word, you're memorizing scripture, you're praying, you're doing those things daily, they're going to see what's more important because it's going to be part of the walk of your life.
Well, and Kyle, I can tell you this, man, that's a very important and talked about a lot, especially with my family and my team. I try to surround myself with as many believers as possible, including my coaches. And we talk about it all the time. And what I've done in my house is exactly what Rocky's talking about is, we talk about Jesus every day. Max will bring it up most of the time, because he's such a strong believer at a very young age. And we talk about it daily. We talk about what scriptures they learned at school. I pray in the mornings. I pray at night with them. Well, I pray at night with them, pray in the mornings by myself. And, we have church on a daily basis. And I look back and I think about all the church services that we missed on Sundays because we're out of town or, we're playing at, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11, whatever it is. And I feel pretty comfortable, obviously it's hard not to question yourself sometimes, but I feel pretty comfortable that my kids know what's most important. And they all believe, all of them, me, my wife, all the kids, they're strong believers. I mean, they do know what's most important. So with all that being said, it's a real thing right now, with these travel baseball and it's hard to come to grips with sometimes as a believer, but I think Rocky's right. I think if you're immersed in it every day and not just on Sundays, I feel like we're doing a pretty dang good job,
I think I worry about a little bit of my own selfishness to where I need Sundays so much. My time at church, like I just get so much from it. It's always emotional for me. Like I know Jesus is always here, but he's really there. And it's like I need that reset. And then I start thinking to myself of like, man, I don't want to get into a habit of missing it. I'm a relatively new Christian, actually. It's something that I've studied for a very long time, but now I'm at that point where I need it. I like it. I don't know that I'm willing to make that sacrifice if it ever comes down to it. And we miss sometimes, but not very often.
Yeah.
Well, just to sum that up, if you stand for going to church, you will always win. if you decide to like, we'll let it slide, we'll go play baseball, whatever, there's no fruit from that. And so like, they always say like when it's gray, like you kind of want to just stay away from the line. Like if it's black or white, it's clear. Like, hey, the Bible says
Yeah.
do this, do that, whatever. But like when it's gray, sometimes it's better just to not even flirt with the line, right? Like, and so at the end of the day, you can't go wrong for standing for what you believe in. And there's only going to be fruit, no matter if they become a professional baseball player or whatever. They are going to be Christ followers, is going to be the most important thing they could possibly do. And so, like, bigger picture, that's what happens. Like, sometimes I was talking about this yesterday. Like, if you don't have a vision of where you want to go in life, a personal vision of like who you want to be as a father, as a husband, as a leader, as a coach, if you don't have that personal vision, guess what? Things are going to distract you from where you want to be. And so you have to be able to know where you're going to say no to everything that doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
so spend that time going like, man, this is important for me and my family, like you talked about, Kyle. And I'm going to be unwavering on this to some degree because this is what's important.
Yeah,
That's good.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I like to wrap up with 5 kind of quick fire questions. So I
Great.
will rattle these questions off. Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. You can think about it a little bit, of course.
Yeah.
Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Does that sound good?
Okay. Sounds good.
First one here. One word that describes a great competitor.
Gritty.
Pretty. Okay.
Yeah.
I won't get us into
You don't have the
defining-
follow up. You don't have the follow up.
I'm
You
not-
always
I'm
have
not-
the follow up for that one.
I study grit. I study grit in adolescence. So so I've written a 120-page literature review on what gritty means. But anyway, I think most of people have a similar definition. What's a thought a player should have before every pitch?
Man, I think it should just be a deep breath, just like centering themselves. So I know this is more than just one word, but try to eliminate thinking. It almost should be like, what's your plan and what you're going to execute? Like this is my, like, be aggressive, or like, a lot of times people don't want to say like, oh, I don't want to walk this person. It's like, be aggressive.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned this earlier, and I didn't get into it, but what happens whenever we say, I hope I don't walk this person, or, I hope I don't do this, that immediately shifts us into playing to avoid failure. And you can't do that. If you're thinking, don't do this, your brain always focuses on the thing. So it would be doing that thing, it doesn't think on the not doing it. So yeah, try to get those don't, or those any sort of negativity out of those thoughts. And I want to like restate what we said earlier, what you said: breathe, relax your shoulders, and whip it. I think that's wonderful. That's a wonderful mission, as long as the player knows what those things mean. All right, what's the biggest mental mistake most players make?
Well, since we talked about so much overthinking.
Yeah, I like that. Say that too. Failure or success, which do you think teaches more?
Failure by a mile.
Absolutely. We talked about this not too long ago, but there's a reason why the Lord teaches through hardship. He knows us quite well, and that's the only way we truly learn. So yeah, failure. I agree with that. With that by a mile. All right, last one. One piece of advice for a young player trying to build confidence.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understandings, but acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your path. If you truly live that verse, truly, it will guide you no matter what direction you're going, whether it's sports or life. When we try to be God, which is the first sin, when Adam and Eve sinned, they were like, oh, you eat this fruit and you get to control your life. It's like we always try to control our lives. And what happens is that's that failure comes in, right? Because we're constantly failing because we make bad choices. But if we truly lean on God, truly understand what his word says and live it out, then I'm not going to say life's going to be easy, but I'll say that it's going to go about as well as it can possibly go.
Yeah. And that, to me, whenever you trust in the Lord like that, that means that whatever happens is what's supposed to happen. So stop worrying about it.
Stop worrying.
Failure, like we talk about, that's an opportunity for feedback. It's an opportunity to praise the Lord for the opportunity, right? The winning that's actually less of an opportunity. But yeah, but if you approach it that way, then again, everything we talk about it being like a big chess game, right? Wins, losses, whatever it might be. All of it adds up. All of it is supposed to happen to get to this end point. So just go with it. Just go with the flow, and can be one way of putting it. Um, Rocky, that was a wonderful conversation. I truly enjoyed it so much. Dylan, is there anything you want to add, or anything that we might have missed?
No, that was awesome. I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I hope that people get something out of it that is more eternal
Yeah.
and life changing and impactful. And I hope parents get something out of it too.
Absolutely.
Me too. And you were incredible. Thank you so much. I hope we can have
Yeah.
you on again someday.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.